The Iron Brotherhood clubhouse sat on the edge of Prescott, Arizona, like a fortress carved from desert stone and defiance. It wasn't the kind of place you wandered into by accident. The building, a converted warehouse with blacked-out windows and steel doors, carried a reputation that preceded it by miles. Inside, the air smelled of motor oil, leather, and the kind of history that wasn't written in books. Marcus Reaper Callahan owned that history. At 47, he was the chapter president of the Iron Brotherhood, a man whose name alone could silence a crowded bar. 6'3", 230 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, with a salt and pepper beard that reached his chest and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. The patch on his leather cut, a skeletal angel wielding chains, told everyone exactly who they were dealing with. Reaper wasn't known for kindness. He was known for control, for loyalty enforced through fear, and for a code that didn't forgive weakness or betrayal. His reputation stretched from Prescott to Phoenix, whispered about in police stations and respected in the underground networks that kept certain wheels turning. People crossed the street when they saw him coming. Cops looked the other way when it suited them. And everyone knew better than to cross the Iron Brotherhood. The clubhouse bar was his domain every Thursday night. Not for parties or chaos, but for business. Money changed hands, disputes got settled, and the chapter's affairs moved forward with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Reaper sat in his usual spot, the corner booth with a clear view of both entrances, nursing a whiskey and reviewing ledgers that documented enterprises the IRS would never see. That's when he noticed her. Elena Martinez had been cleaning the clubhouse for 3 months. Quiet, efficient, invisible, exactly what Reaper preferred in hired help. She came in at 9, cleaned until midnight, and left without saying more than necessary. She was 32, but looked older, with dark hair pulled back tight, exhausted eyes, and the kind of practiced invisibility that came from years of trying not to be noticed. Tonight, something was different. Reaper's eyes, trained by decades of reading situations and sensing danger, caught the way Elena moved as she wiped down tables across the room. Her left arm stayed close to her body, and she used only her right hand to wring out the rag. When she reached for a glass on a high shelf, she winced, and for just a second her sleeve rode up. The bruises were impossible to miss, dark purple and yellow, wrapping around her wrist like a handprint frozen in flesh. Fresh. Maybe a day old, maybe less. Elena noticed him watching and quickly pulled the sleeve down, her face going pale. She turned away, focusing intently on a spot that didn't need cleaning, her shoulders tense with the fear of being seen. Reaper didn't move, didn't call out. He just watched, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. In his world, he'd seen every kind of violence, every shade of brutality. He'd caused plenty of it himself when necessary. But there was a code, a line that separated the Brotherhood's brand of justice from the kind of cowardice that left bruises on a woman's wrist. 10 minutes passed. Elena kept her distance, working the far side of the room, avoiding his booth like it was surrounded by invisible walls. Her movements were practiced, mechanical, the motions of someone who'd learned to disappear into her work. Finally, Reaper drained his whiskey and stood. His boots echoed on the concrete floor as he walked toward her. Elena froze, her back to him, knuckles white around the rag she was holding. "Elena." His voice was low, gravelly, not angry, but carrying the weight of absolute authority. She turned slowly, eyes down, every muscle in her body screaming tension. "Yes, sir." Up close, Reaper could see more, a fading bruise on her cheekbone hidden under makeup, the way she held her left wrist protectively, the trembling she couldn't quite control. Who did it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Elena's eyes went wide, and she opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The silence that followed spoke louder than any confession. I don't know what." "Don't." Reaper's voice cut through her denial like a blade. "I'm not asking twice." Elena's composure cracked, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall, and her voice came out barely above a whisper. "It's complicated. It never is." Reaper studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, his voice softened, just slightly, like a mountain settling. "You got someone to stay with tonight?" She shook her head. "Take tomorrow off. Paid. Stay away from here until Saturday." Elena looked up at him, confusion and fear mixing in her eyes. I need this job. I can work. I promise." I'm not firing you. Reaper turned to leave, then paused. But tomorrow you're not coming in. And whoever put those marks on you. He glanced back, and for just a second Elena saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Not danger aimed at her, but the promise of it aimed elsewhere. They're about to learn what happens when you touch what's under my roof. He walked away, leaving Eleanor standing alone in the empty bar, her heart pounding and her mind racing with equal parts terror and something she hadn't felt in years, hope. Outside, Reaper pulled his phone from his cut and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. Tiny, I need information. Elena Martinez, our cleaning woman. Find out who she's afraid of. And I mean everything. Where they live, where they work, what they drive. I want it by midnight. He hung up without waiting for confirmation. In the Iron Brotherhood, orders from Reaper weren't suggestions. They were law. The desert night was cold, stars burning overhead like distant witnesses. Reaper lit a cigarette and stared out at the darkness beyond the clubhouse parking lot. He wasn't a hero. He'd never pretended to be. But there were lines even he wouldn't cross, and monsters he wouldn't tolerate, especially not in his territory. By morning, someone was going to learn that lesson the hard way. Midnight came and went at the Iron Brotherhood clubhouse. Most of the brothers had cleared out by 11, leaving only the core, the men Reaper trusted with blood secrets and buried bodies. They sat in the back room, a space that smelled of cigars and old leather, where the walls were thick enough that nothing said inside ever escaped. Timothy "Tiny" Rodriguez wasn't tiny. At 6'6" and 300 pounds of solid muscle, the road captain of the Iron Brotherhood looked like he could bend steel with his bare hands. Which, on at least 2 occasions, he had. But his real talent wasn't intimidation, it was information. Before the Brotherhood, Tiny had spent 5 years as a skip tracer, finding people who didn't want to be found. Now he put those skills to work for the club. He walked into the back room at 11:47 p.m. with a manila folder in his massive hands and a grim expression on his face that made even Reaper sit up straighter. Got what you wanted, Reaper. You're not gonna like it. Reaper gestured to the empty chair across from him. 3 other brothers sat in the shadows. Diesel, the club's enforcer, Snake, the sergeant-at-arms, and Crow, whose specialty was making problems disappear. They all wore the same cut, the same patch, the same expression of cold attention. Tiny opened the folder. Elena Martinez, 32, been in Prescott for 4 years. Works 3 jobs. Cleaning here, weekend shifts at the diner on Whiskey Row and part-time at the library. No criminal record, no family in the area. Lives alone in that run-down apartment complex off Sheldon Street. Get to the part that matters, Reaper said quietly, his whiskey untouched on the table in front of him. Tiny pulled out a photograph, a police personnel file. The man in the picture was clean-cut, square-jawed, with cold blue eyes, and the kind of smile that didn't reach anywhere near his soul. Officer Derek Brennan, Prescott PD, 38 years old, 12 years on the force, currently assigned to patrol, but he's angling for detective, decorated, connected. His uncle's a state senator, and his father's retired FBI. The room went very quiet. He's her ex-husband, Tiny continued. Married 5 years, divorced 2 years ago. Restraining order filed, then mysteriously dropped 6 months later. Hospital visits. Elena went to the ER twice during the marriage, once for a fall down the stairs, once for a car accident. Both times, Brennan was the one who drove her. Diesel leaned forward, his scarred knuckles cracking. Cop, of course it's a fucking cop. Gets worse, Tiny said. Brennan's got a reputation. I talked to a bartender who knows him. Guy likes to drink, likes to talk big about his badge, and likes to remind people that he's untouchable. Word is he still considers Elena his property. Been seen outside her apartment at least twice in the past month. She filed another complaint 3 weeks ago, but it got buried. His sergeant's a buddy from the academy. Reaper's expression didn't change, but his eyes went very dark, the kind of dark that came before storms. Where's he live? Ranch-style house. North edge of town near Granite Dells. Lives alone, no girlfriend on record. Works patrol shifts, 4 on 3 off. His next shift starts tomorrow morning at 7. Snake, a wiry man with prison tattoos crawling up his neck, spoke up. Reaper, you know what we're looking at here. Touching a cop, especially one with connections, that brings heat we might not be able to handle. I'm aware, Reaper said coldly. He picked up the photograph, studying Derek Brennan's face with the intensity of a man memorizing a target. Tiny, what's his route? Patrols the east side mostly. Stops at the gas station on Highway 89 every morning around 7:30 for coffee. Likes the blonde who works the counter. Tiny pulled out another sheet. Drives Unit 47, a marked cruiser. Parks it at his house overnight, which is against department policy, but nobody says shit because of who his family is. Crow, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it more unnerving. "You want this clean or loud?" Reaper stood, draining his whiskey in one smooth motion. "I want it to send a message. Not to the department, to him. To every motherfucker who thinks a badge gives them the right to put hands on someone weaker." He set the glass down with controlled precision. "Elena doesn't come back to work until Saturday. That gives us tomorrow night." "What's the play?" Diesel asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer but ready to follow anyway. That was the Brotherhood way. Reaper walked to the wall where a map of Prescott and the surrounding area was pinned. His finger traced a route from Brennan's house to the edge of town, where the desert stretched out endless and empty. "Tomorrow night, Officer Brennan's going to learn that there are some people you don't touch, some lines you don't cross, and some angels who don't need wings to deliver justice." He turned back to his brothers, and in that moment, he looked exactly like what he was. Not a hero, not a villain, but something older and more primal. A force of nature in human skin. "Tiny, I need his schedule confirmed. Diesel, prep the van. Snake, make sure we've got tools. Crow..." Reaper's eyes met the other man's. "You know what to do after." Crow nodded once. No words needed. "We move at 2 a.m. He'll be asleep. We'll be gone before sunrise. And by the time anyone realizes something's wrong, Officer Derek Brennan will wish he'd never laid a hand on anyone." The brothers stood, the scraping of chairs the only sound in the thick silence. They didn't ask questions. They didn't voice doubts. This was what they were. A family bound not by blood but by loyalty, and a code that outsiders would never understand. As they filed out to prepare, Tiny lingered. "Reaper, you sure about this? Elena doesn't know we're doing this. She might not want..." "She doesn't get a choice." Reaper's voice was final. "She came to work under my roof. That makes her mine to protect. And that piece of shit in the uniform?" He tapped the photograph. "He made his choice when he put bruises on her wrist. Now he gets to live with the consequences." Tiny nodded and left. Alone in the back room, Reaper stood staring at the map. He wasn't a good man. He'd never claimed to be. He'd done things that would send most people to hell without a trial. But in his world, the world of leather and chrome, of brotherhood and blood, there were still rules, still lines. And Derek Brennan had crossed every single one. Outside, the Arizona night stretched cold and infinite. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called out, a hunter announcing itself to the world. Reaper smiled, thin and cold. By morning, Prescott would have one less monster walking its streets, and one woman would finally be able to breathe without looking over her shoulder. 2:17 a.m. The desert night was at its coldest, that dead hour when even the coyotes went quiet and the world held its breath. A black van without plates rolled slowly through the empty streets of North Prescott. Headlights off, engine barely above a whisper. Inside, 4 men sat in silence. Each wore dark clothing, gloves, and the kind of calm that came from having done this before. Reaper rode shotgun, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Diesel drove with the precision of someone who'd navigated worse situations. In the back, Snake and Crow checked equipment, rope, zip ties, duct tape, and tools that didn't need naming. Derek Brennan's house appeared through the darkness like a promise about to be kept. Ranch-style, single-story, isolated at the end of a dirt road with no close neighbors. His patrol cruiser sat in the driveway, radio silent, the engine cold. A single light burned in what looked like the living room window, probably left on by habit or paranoia. "Alarm system?" Snake whispered. "Basic setup." Tiny's voice came through Reaper's earpiece. He was a mile away in his truck monitoring police scanners and security feeds. Motion sensors on the doors, probably nothing on the windows. Standard cop arrogance, thinks the badge protects him at home. Reaper's smile was predatory. It doesn't. The van stopped 3 houses down, hidden behind a cluster of juniper trees. The men moved like shadows, silent and synchronized. Reaper had done this dance dozens of times, the approach, the breach, the extraction. But tonight felt different. Tonight wasn't about club business or territory disputes. Tonight was personal, in a way that made his blood run cold and hot at the same time. They reached the side of Brennan's house. Crow produced a glass cutter and went to work on a bathroom window, the one room where motion sensors rarely got installed. 20 seconds later, the glass was out. 30 seconds after that, Snake was through the opening, disabling the alarm panel with practiced efficiency. The back door opened silently. Inside, the house smelled like beer, microwaved food, and arrogance. The living room was exactly what Reaper expected, a cop's shrine to himself. Commendations on the wall, photos of Brennan in uniform, chest puffed out, surrounded by other cops, a gun safe in the corner, probably unlocked, because who would dare rob a cop? And on the coffee table next to an empty beer bottle, a framed photo that made Reaper's jaw clench. Elena, younger, smiling, standing next to Brennan on what must have been their wedding day. Her smile didn't reach her eyes even then. "Bedroom's down the hall," Diesel murmured, pointing. They moved as one, boots silent on the cheap carpet. The bedroom door was half open. Inside, Derek Brennan slept sprawled across a king-size bed, snoring lightly, one arm thrown over his face. He wore boxer shorts and nothing else. On the nightstand sat his badge, his service weapon, and a half-empty bottle of bourbon. For just a second, Reaper considered waking him, letting him see what was coming, but that would be mercy, and mercy wasn't on the menu tonight. Snake moved first, lightning fast, one hand clamped over Brennan's mouth, the other pressing a chemical-soaked rag against his nose. Brennan's eyes shot open, panic and confusion flashing across his face as he tried to fight back, but 4 against 1 in the dark, with no badge to hide behind. He never had a chance. 30 seconds later, Derek Brennan went limp. "Package secure," Diesel said into his mic. "Clock's ticking," Tiny's voice crackled back. "Neighbor 2 streets over has insomnia. Saw her lights come on. Move." They zip-tied Brennan's wrists and ankles, wrapped him in a dark blanket and carried him through the house like a rolled-up carpet. Reaper paused at the coffee table, picked up the framed photo of Elena, and methodically smashed it on the floor. Then he took out a permanent marker and wrote 2 words on the wall above the gun safe. "Some angels." The van swallowed them and their cargo, doors sliding shut with barely a sound. Diesel pulled away slowly. No rush, just another vehicle in the night. In the back, Brennan lay unconscious, his breath shallow but steady. Crow sat over him, watching with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. "Where are we taking him?" Snake asked. Reaper stared out the window at the passing desert. "The old copper mine, 20 miles out past Skull Valley. Place hasn't been active in 30 years. No cameras, no witnesses, no cell service. And then? Then Officer Brennan learns what happens when you hurt people under my protection." The drive took 45 minutes. Dawn was still hours away when they turned onto a forgotten access road, the van bouncing over rocks and ruts that hadn't seen maintenance since the Reagan administration. The mine entrance appeared like a wound in the earth, a black mouth surrounded by rusted warning signs and chain-link fence that had long since fallen away. They parked inside the old processing building, a skeleton of corrugated steel and broken concrete. Reaper got out and breathed in the desert air, cold and clean and infinite. This was his territory, his Arizona, and men like Derek Brennan didn't get to poison it. They dragged Brennan out of the van and zip-tied him to a support beam, letting him hang there like a scarecrow. Then they waited. At 4:23 a.m. he woke up. The confusion came first, eyes blinking, head turning, brain trying to process why he was zip-tied in an abandoned building in the middle of nowhere. Then came recognition, as his eyes focused on the 4 men standing in front of him, their faces partially hidden by the shadows. Then came fear. Who the fuck are you?" Brennan's voice cracked, the tough cop bravado evaporating in seconds. "Do you know who I am? I'm a police officer. When they find you—" "They won't," Reaper said calmly, stepping into the dim light. "You know why? Because nobody's looking yet. And by the time they do, you'll be long gone, and we'll be ghosts." Brennan's eyes went wide as recognition set in. You're that biker. The one from—" He tried to lunge forward, but the zip ties held. "This is kidnapping, this is assault, I'll have you—" "Elena Martinez," Reaper said, his voice cutting through Brennan's panic like a knife through butter. Brennan froze, his face went pale. "The woman you married, the woman you beat, the woman you terrorized for years even after she left you." Reaper crouched down, his eyes level with Brennan's. "The woman you put your hands on 3 days ago, breaking her wrist because she refused to talk to you. That's a lie. She fell. She's clumsy. Diesel's fist connected with Brennan's ribs. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make breathing hurt. Brennan gasped, coughing. Don't, Reaper said quietly. Don't insult me with lies. We know everything. We know about the hospital visits, the complaints that got buried, the restraining order your buddies made disappear. We know what you are. Brennan's tough guy mask shattered completely. Tears started rolling down his face. Please, please, I'll leave her alone. I'll transfer stations, I'll move, whatever you want. What I want, Reaper said, standing up, is for you to understand something. You hid behind a badge, behind family connections, behind a system that protected you because you wore a uniform. You thought that made you untouchable, invincible. He walked to the edge of the building, where the first grey hints of dawn were beginning to creep across the desert horizon. But out here, your badge doesn't mean shit. Your family doesn't mean shit. You're just a coward who likes to hurt people weaker than him. What are you going to do to me? Brennan whispered, his voice breaking. Reaper turned back, and his smile was cold as the desert night. I'm going to give you a choice. Option 1, we leave you here, cut you loose, let you walk. You disappear, not just from Elena's life, but from Arizona entirely. You resign from the force, you move far away, and you never come back. You become a ghost. And option 2. There is no option 2. Reaper's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. Because if you ever come back, if you ever contact Elena again, if you so much as think about her, we'll find you. And next time there won't be a conversation, there won't be a choice. There'll just be a desert grave so deep nobody will ever find what's left. The silence that followed was absolute. Crow stepped forward with a knife, cutting the zip ties. Brennan collapsed to the ground, rubbing his wrists, his face covered in tears and snot and terror. Your cruiser's going to be found on the edge of town this morning, Reaper said. Engine running, radio on, driver's door open. They'll think you abandoned it. Maybe had a breakdown, maybe ran off. Your badge and gun will be inside. Everything else is up to you. They left him there, curled up on the concrete floor, sobbing. The van pulled away as the sun broke over the mountains, painting the desert gold and red and infinite. Inside the van, nobody spoke. There was nothing to say. They'd delivered justice, not the kind that happened in courtrooms, but the kind that happened in shadows, enforced by men who lived outside the law, but held to a code even more binding. By 7 a.m., Derek Brennan's patrol cruiser was discovered by a passing motorist, abandoned on Highway 89, engine running, driver's door wide open. His badge lay on the dashboard. His gun sat in the passenger seat. The radio crackled with unanswered calls. Officer Derek Brennan never showed up for his shift. He was never seen in Prescott again. Saturday morning broke clear and cool over Prescott, the kind of Arizona morning that made people forget the desert could kill them. Elena Martinez stood outside the Iron Brotherhood clubhouse at 8:55 a.m., her hand trembling as she reached for the door. She'd spent the past 2 days in her apartment, confused, terrified, and hopeful in equal measure, a combination that felt dangerous to trust. Reaper had told her to take time off. She'd taken it, spending Thursday and Friday jumping at every sound, expecting Derek to show up, to pound on her door, to finish what he'd started, but he never came. And that was somehow more frightening than if he had. She pushed open the door. The clubhouse looked exactly as it always did. Dim lighting, the smell of motor oil and beer, motorcycles lined up outside like sleeping metal beasts. But something felt different in the air, lighter somehow, like a storm had passed and left clean sky behind. Elena, she turned. Reaper stood by the bar, coffee in hand, looking like he always did, dangerous, controlled, unreadable. But when his eyes met hers, something in them was almost gentle. You came back, he said. You said Saturday. Her voice was small, uncertain. Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong? You did nothing wrong. Reaper gestured to a bar stool. Sit. She did, perching nervously on the edge, her hands clasped in her lap. Her wrist was wrapped in an ace bandage now, the bruises hidden but still there, still hurting. Reaper set a cup of coffee in front of her. Cream, no sugar, exactly how she took it. He'd noticed. You hear the news this morning? Eleanor shook her head. Local cop went missing Thursday night. Derek Brennan. You know him? The color drained from Eleanor's face. Her hands started shaking so badly she had to grip the coffee cup to stop them. How did you... Doesn't matter how I know. Reaper's voice was calm, factual. What matters is, he's gone. His cruiser was found abandoned. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. Departments calling it a voluntary disappearance. Rumor is he had a breakdown, walked away from everything. Elena stared at him, her eyes wide, tears starting to form. That's not possible. Derek wouldn't just leave. He has his career, his family, connections. People leave all the time, Reaper said quietly. Especially when they realize they're not as untouchable as they thought they were. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Elena looked at Reaper, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that confirmed what her brain couldn't quite process. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't Derek having a breakdown. This was Reaper. "You," she whispered, her voice cracking. "What did you do?" "I gave him a choice." Reaper took a sip of his coffee, his expression never changing. "He made the smart decision. That's all you need to know. But the police, they'll investigate. They'll figure out nothing." Reaper's voice was final. "Because there's nothing to figure out. A cop with a troubled past and a history of violence left his cruiser on the side of the road and disappeared. Happens more than you'd think. The department will investigate for a while, then move on. Nobody's going to look too hard for a guy who beat his ex-wife." Elena's hands covered her mouth, trying to hold back sobs that came anyway. Not from fear or sadness, but from something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. Pure, overwhelming, dangerous relief. "Why?" she finally managed to ask through the tears. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." Reaper was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "I told you. You work under my roof. That makes you mine to protect." He looked up at her. "And men like him, men who use power to hurt people who can't fight back, they don't get to exist in my world." "But you're—" Elena stopped herself, but the words were already out there. "A criminal." Reaper smiled thinly. "Yeah, I am. I've done things that would make your ex-husband look like a saint. But here's the difference. I own what I am. I don't hide behind a badge or pretend I'm protecting and serving while I terrorize innocent people. The Brotherhood has a code. We follow it. And anyone who breaks it or threatens what's ours learns real fast what that means." Elena wiped her eyes, her breath still shaky. "What if he comes back? What if he—" "He won't." The certainty in Reaper's voice left no room for doubt. "Trust me, Derek Brennan is never coming back to Prescott. And if he's smart, he'll never come back to Arizona. He knows what happens if he does." The weight that had been sitting on Elena's chest for years, the constant fear, the looking over her shoulder, the nightmares of Derek showing up, began to lift. Not completely, not yet, but enough that she could breathe without feeling like something was crushing her lungs. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Don't say anything." Reaper stood, finishing his coffee. "Just clean the clubhouse like you always do. Come back next Thursday. Keep living your life, that's all." He started to walk away, but Elena called out, "Wait." Reaper turned. "Thank you." Her voice was steadier now, stronger. "I know what you did. I know what you risked. And I know I can never repay it. But thank you." Reaper studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "We take care of our own, Elena. Remember that." He walked away, his boots echoing on the concrete floor, and disappeared into the back room where his brothers were already gathering for morning business. Elena sat alone at the bar for another minute, letting the reality sink in. Derek was gone. Actually gone. Not just hiding, not just lying low, but gone in a way that felt permanent and final. The man who had terrorized her for years, who had made her feel small and worthless and trapped, that man no longer had power over her, because someone had taken that power away. She stood, grabbed her cleaning supplies, and got to work. But for the first time in years, she did it without fear tightening her shoulders, without constantly listening for footsteps behind her, without wondering if today would be the day Derek showed up to finish what he started. 1 week later, the Prescott Police Department's investigation into Derek Brennan's disappearance was officially downgraded to a cold case. His family hired a private investigator who found nothing. His cruiser had been processed and returned no usable evidence. His house was searched and revealed nothing unusual except a broken picture frame and 2 words written on the living room wall in permanent marker: "Some angels." Nobody knew what it meant. The Iron Brotherhood Clubhouse continued operating as it always had. Business moved forward. Deals got made. The chapter maintained its reputation across Arizona as a force not to be crossed. And every Thursday night, when Reaper sat in his corner booth, reviewing ledgers and drinking whiskey, Elena cleaned the clubhouse with something she'd forgotten how to feel: peace. She never asked what happened that night. Reaper never told her. Some things were better left in the shadows where they belonged. One Thursday evening, as Elena was finishing up, Reaper called out to her. "You doing all right?" She looked up, surprised he'd asked. "Yeah, I am. Better than I've been in I don't know how long." "Good." He returned to his ledger, then added quietly, "You need anything, and I mean anything, you tell me. Clear?" "Clear." Reaper nodded, satisfied. That was the end of the conversation. But Elena understood what he was really saying. "You're protected now. You're part of this family, and we don't abandon family." She finished cleaning and left through the back door, stepping out into the cool Arizona night. The stars burned overhead, infinite and bright, indifferent witnesses to the justice that had been delivered in their light. Somewhere out there, Derek Brennan was alive. If you could call what he was doing living. He'd resurfaced briefly in Nevada, working construction under a fake name, drinking heavily, jumping at shadows. He'd never filed a missing person report on himself, never contacted his family, never returned to law enforcement, because he knew. He knew that if he ever came back, if he ever broke the terms of the choice he'd been given, there would be men waiting in the darkness. Men who didn't need badges or warrants or trials. Men who delivered justice in forms the law could never touch. Some angels, Derek learned, didn't need wings. They just needed loyalty, a code, and the will to protect what was theirs. And in the Arizona desert, under an endless sky, the Iron Brotherhood rode on, feared by many, understood by few, but respected by all who knew what they really were. Not heroes or villains, but something older, something primal. Protectors of a code that predated law and would outlast it. And Elena Martinez, for the first time in years, slept through the night without nightmares, because she finally understood. She was safe, she was protected, she was home.